Hello and good morning. I can still talk if you're standing. I can also talk if you're sitting. I can also talk if you decide to lay down and take a nap. I will raise my voice and I will do what I need to do in order to keep you awake. I know you've got some coffee. That's going to help. I'll keep my voice up. Maybe that'll help too. Now, for those of you who have been here for a long time, let's say 10 years plus, that I have been coming here, you may be aware that I have been a competitive swimmer for a long time, most of my life. Because of that, I did swim at Cornell, and while I was at Cornell, we did have a girl on the women's team. She was from the Canadian national team, and when I got down to the University of Florida for graduate school, I also I was in touch with the swim team there. They had a number of Canadian national swim team members as well. And you may be aware, I mean, probably the most famous Canadian swimmer is Summer McIntosh. You may have heard of her. She's broken a couple of world records. And she got tired of the COVID chaos and is now swimming in Sarasota, Florida under Brent Arkey, who used to be in Gainesville. I know Brent very well, spent a couple of years with him. He coached me a little bit, and I also swam a number of sets with him as well. So he's now coaching Summer, and we're expecting great things from her at the Olympics. So based upon this, something rather dastardly has happened to me. This swimmer was just informed yesterday that a ticket had been purchased for him in order to attend the Edmonton Oilers hockey game later on tonight. Talk about a fish out of water. So usually when I go to a sporting competition, I am swimming through the water. Now I'm going to a sporting competition tonight where the athletes are going to be skating across the water. So this is going to be a little unusual for me. 55 years old, and I have never been to a hockey game before, but in a matter of hours, I will be. So that has its own excitement associated with it. But there's a little bit more excitement associated with it that you may not be aware of. Do you realize that today, the Edmonton Oilers will be going against the Chicago Blackhawks? Now, you may think immediately, oh, I see where he's going with this. Canadian team going against the team from the United States. I get this. I see where he's going. Yeah, there's going to be a little bit of rivalry. And I would say, no, it's actually much worse than you think. My wife is from Chicago. Her entire family is from Chicago. I have been told by the family in no uncertain terms that I am not to cheer for any of the Edmonton Oiler athletes at all, or I will be disowned. If I am not disowned, it will be a slow and painful death. So if I am on TV in the stands of this game, and I am found doing something that I should not be doing as maybe a Canadian or maybe as an American, it could be seen by the family. So it has been a wonderful 10 years. You may not see me again, ever. And for that, I would like to thank you for that time that I've spent with you thus far.
You don't need to worry. The best players on the Blackhawks are all from Western Canada.
Western Canada. That is actually a true statement. I understand that because having been to Cornell, if you're not aware, Cornell is one of the best hockey teams in the country. And the reason why we have one of the best hockey teams in the country is because it's almost all Canadians. Very few Americans on the Cornell team. So, all right, thank you very much, Cindy. Cindy just took the video right now, and it is now going to my wife. I am wondering if there's going to be a response from her before I finish the presentation. We will see. Thank you. I suppose you will. So thank you for taking that, Cindy. I appreciate that. I'm sure there'll be a little shock from her, too. Oh, well. sometimes I usually get questions when I go back home, so what did you do? How did it go? And I was like, well, I sent you a video this time, so. All right, now the talk. Oh, by the way, if any of you have any advice for me, please let me know, because this was my first game. Don't tell me about the cowbells. I already got briefed about the cowbells already. But if there's anything else I need to know before I go tonight, please do. If anyone has any questions for me, too, I know I said I was going to be here the entire day. That is no longer valid. At 5:30, I was told that I need to be in the lobby because they're taking me to the game, which I think starts at 7. So if there are any questions that you have for me, try to get them in before, I guess, 5 or so. I do have to go upstairs and change. They don't want me wearing a suit and tie to a hockey game. I've got more advice. Oh, yes.
Oh, I got a question for you.
Yes.
You know what a hat trick is?
Hat trick is? I do not know what a hat trick is.
Learn that before tonight.
I will learn that before the end of the night. I am looking forward to that. This is going to be an educational experience for me. It's also really weird, too, because when I go to a sporting competition, I mean, I'm sorry about the image, but I'm wearing a Speedo. Now, tonight, I got to wear a hat, I got to wear gloves, I have to put on a coat. Whew. This is going to be very, very foreign to this fish out of water. All right, the topic. The topic Cindy asked for is paramagnetism and antennas in agriculture. They are both related to one another, and they are separate from one another. So there'll be a little bit of a change of pace when I switch from the paramagnetism and then go into the antennas, but understand that there's still that association. For those of you who are not aware, oftentimes you hear about fields, and you hear about electromagnetic fields. The reason why they're called electromagnetic is because there's an electrical component and a magnetic component, and they are difficult to separate. But sometimes the effect of an electromagnetic field is from the electrical side, and sometimes the effect is from the magnetic side. So that's why the issue of antennas will come up. So that will be a focus near the end of the presentation as I delve into the concept of antennas, because it will relate in some fashion to paramagnetism. Now, paramagnetism is something that you probably have not heard before. It was a bigger issue with my mentor, who took me through the PhD, Phil Callahan, who wrote a book on paramagnetism. There have been various attempts by certain individuals and companies to do research on paramagnetism. I can tell you that almost nothing has been done over the past 10 years, very little over the past 15, and only a small amount, I would say, over the past 20 years. So what I'm about to present to you is not going to be as well researched, let's say, as much as the last talk. There are going to be some comments that will, during this presentation, which will sound non-scientific, like, whoa, the plants seem to be bigger, that type of thing. And so because of that, I need you to understand that because there's a relative lack of research in paramagnetism, this is going to take a slightly different tone than certainly the first presentation or even presentations that I've given with a lot more data. Now, you are going to see data here. I am going to tell you about some of the effects of paramagnetism and how this affects agriculture. So it's a relatively old science, several decades old, and I'm sure some of you will be introduced to it for the very first time today. So let us begin. And we have to begin with the definition. What is paramagnetism? You all understand what magnetism is. Magnetism is a magnet, and it's got a magnetic attraction to your refrigerator. So you can post things up, like your kid's artwork, okay? That is ferromagnetism. Ferromagnetism is based upon iron. That's where the name comes from, F-E-R-R. It's the root for iron. And so we have ferrous substances that are known to be iron substances. And they produce an inherent magnetic field. Inherent means it's an actual constituent of the magnet. And no matter where you go with that magnetic field comes with it. So we'll stick to any refrigerator in any location, and that's just the way ferromagnetism works. This is what we're all familiar with. What we're probably not familiar with is paramagnetism and diamagnetism. They are opposed to one another. Paramagnetism is induced, meaning it's not an actual part of the material. Diamagnetism, same thing. It has to be induced to show a magnetic field, meaning that it needs to be in a magnetic field in order to work as a paramagnetic or a diamagnetic substance. So if I take a horseshoe magnet and I'm really, really strong and I throw it up into space, it is just as magnetic up in space as it was here on Earth. If I take a paramagnetic rock and I thrust it into space, it loses all magnetism. All magnetic properties are gone because it is no longer in the magnetic field, the geomagnetic field with which it is being bathed in, and therefore causes the induction of the magnetic effect. This has been described, understood by physicists, engineers, chemists, trying to understand this effect because it is different. And because it's different, well, we scientists like to call it a different name. So it's magnetism, yes, but it's not ferromagnetism, and therefore it has to be called something different. And that's where the terms para and dia have come from. The unit of measurement is CGS. That's centimeter per gram per second. And essentially, I know this doesn't sound horribly scientific, but this is the way it works. When they were first measuring this 100 years ago, back in the 1900s, they would have a regular magnet, and they would have a rock that may be paramagnetic, and they would hang it by a string, and they would look to see how far the rock moves towards the magnet. And that would be measured in centimeters. That's it. Centimeters per gram for the weight of the rock per second. How fast does it move towards the magnet? That's where CGS has come from. Centimeter, gram, second. And it's a very small amount. It really is and truly, I love that sound. It just reminds me of home. Times 10 to the negative sixth. So it's a very small quantity. It is not the powerful energy that we all associate with a kitchen magnet or a horseshoe magnet, which can run into 1,000, 2,000 Gauss or more. These are much, much lower level. So what happens? This is taken from both the Dictionary of Chemistry and the Dictionary of Physics. What is the definition of this? In paramagnetism, the atoms or molecules of the substance have net orbital or spin magnetic moments. That are capable of being aligned in the direction of the applied field. It's the second part that's understandable. The first part, not so easy to follow. But essentially what they're saying is that the particles within a paramagnetic rock are able to align themselves once they're in a magnetic field, a geomagnetic field. This capability is not what you find in a ferromagnet, but it is what you find in a paramagnetic rock or a diamagnetic rock or a diamagnetic substance. So we've got some of the definitions out of the way. This is just to visualize what is happening. So if we have a paramagnetic substance and it's not in a field, the arrangement of the molecules, and I've exaggerated this horribly, are disoriented. Once a magnetic field is imposed, the molecules are actually able to adjust themselves and line up within a magnetic field. That is in essence what is occurring. It is fundamentally different than ferromagnetism. All right. Historical moments in the development of paramagnetism in agriculture and the association, because it seems like this is just a weird substance that they do in academia, and it was Phil Callahan who said, no, there's actually some benefit to plants for this. So plants growing out of rock. Remember I discussed about this yesterday. There are plants growing out of rock with little to no soil in their root systems. And there are plants growing around rock. It will not surprise you that these rocks are almost always paramagnetic. Paramagnetic soil is found below the redwoods in California in relative plenitude. Does this mean that if they didn't have the paramagnetic qualities, they wouldn't be 300 feet tall? I don't know, but it has been found underneath the redwoods. Paramagnetic soil is found covering, absolutely covering, the Hawaiian Islands because it is associated with volcanic activity and volcanic eruptions. Almost everything coming out will eventually become paramagnetic rock, and so the Hawaiian Islands are covered with the stuff. And before they actually brought chemicals in, some of the food coming out of Hawaii was incredibly high bricks. Basaltic rock is generally paramagnetic. There are some exceptions. It can be zero, but it can be highly paramagnetic. While other rocks, it can be hit or miss. Basaltic rock, almost always guaranteed to be paramagnetic. The others, you really have to measure it in order to do that. And the round towers in Ireland, which are antennas, I'll talk about those briefly, were sometimes filled, sometimes they were emptied, but they were sometimes filled with paramagnetic rock. And so we had these antennas filled with highly paramagnetic rock, which makes a lot of people scratch their heads thinking, what were the ancients thinking? And so gases, let's take a look at the gases. Almost all of the gases that we're familiar with, such as carbon dioxide and hydrogen, are slightly diamagnetic. Almost all of them. But there is a glaring exception. Oxygen is not diamagnetic. It is paramagnetic, and highly so. Look at this. 3449, positive 3449. We've got negative readings going all the way down, even now down to bromine at 56, which is not huge, but certainly doesn't compare with a positive 3449. So you've got paramagnetic qualities in rock that I'll be discussing, but you've also got oxygen. Oxygen is paramagnetic. Highly oxygenated soil will also add a paramagnetic quality, a measurable paramagnetic quality to the soil. Some field trials. This was done back in 1996. As I said, nothing has been done recently, so I'm just going to cover a few trials that were done. This was reported in Acres, USA. Gary Wilson was the author. He has since passed on. God rest his soul. Douglas Murray. I don't know if he's still around, but he was monitoring it. And they used a rock. The rock had a CGS reading of 4850. So it was a relatively high paramagnetic rock, and they wanted to test it to see what kind of effect it had on plants, because Phil Callahan was reporting that he was getting some rather impressive and surprising results from it. So what they did is they found that the corn was 12 inches taller. They're like, wow, that's kind of, and it wasn't even close. It wasn't like 1 or 2 inches. It was a whole foot. A foot is 12 inches in the United States of America. So this is going to be about 1/3 of a meter for those of you still in the metric system. I like to talk slow, make sure we're all following one another. They also found that the corn plants were darker green and had a more uniform stand when they had the paramagnetic rock on the corn. They did find that the corn was picked 4 days earlier. Not huge, but 4 days can be 4 days. Sometimes that can be critical. That can actually make you a lot of money. Other times won't make a hill of beans difference to you. But it was picked 4 days earlier, so it was ripening a little bit faster with the paramagnetic. They had an average bricks of 12. They maxed out at 15 bricks with the paramagnetic rock. So the corn was coming in at 12 on average. But the rock, they did not use rock in the control, and that was averaging 9 bricks. So a difference of 3 bricks is very significant. Anything greater than half a bricks, in my mind, is significant in my mind. So when I see a difference of 3, I'm thinking, okay, that's pretty big. 6 times higher than I'm looking for. And they only had a high of 10 bricks among the corn that they tested with the average of 9. So it looked pretty consistent. The length of the ear, about the same, 8 3/4 inches versus 8 1/4 inches. So the ears were about the same size. But you can see curiously, there was something going on. There was something interesting going on. The plants were responding to the paramagnetic rock. They also found too, and this I don't even have conclusions for, I don't even know what to say, but the weeds in the field distributed themselves after the application of paramagnetic rock. You had certain weeds that were there in the control, and then in the paramagnetic rock, you had very different weeds that appeared, just flip-flopping, this type of stuff. And so even the weeds were recognizing the presence of the paramagnetic rock and were adjusting themselves accordingly. I don't have conclusions on this. I don't know what was going on. I wasn't there, but I find this very interesting. There's another result too. This is Men of Trees, something you'll find on the internet. There's an organization called Men of the Trees. I think they were growing trees for paper, I think. So I think these were pine trees. And they had 15 to 20 tons per hectare of paramagnetic rock, a relatively heavy amount of paramagnetic rock. And they found that the trees grew 5 times faster. That is much more significant than just a difference of 12 inches. At least I think so. But obviously trees take a long time to grow. But you can see that there are some curiosities. And as a scientist, I become curious as to what is going on with this. So that's what we knew with the Men of Trees. One of the common notes that were made at the conclusion of the experiment, and here we go, it's not scientific, all the plants in the rock-treated area were taller, they were greener than any of the plants in the area not treated with rock. Is that something you can take to the bank? Not necessarily. Is that something you can publish? Not really. But these observations are adding. You continue to add information that gets my mind going, and hopefully your mind going too, as to what is going on with this substance. Most of the paramagnetic rock is associated with volcanic activity. And so we have igneous, and then there's sedimentary and metamorphic rock. The igneous rock has solidified from molten or partly molten material, that is from the magma part of a volcano. The sedimentary rock is very, very different. It results from the consolidation of loose sediment or chemical precipitation from solution at or near the Earth's surface, or an organic rock consisting of the secretions or remains of plants or animals. Most plants and animals are diamagnetic, so you will usually not find high paramagnetic activity within sedimentary rock. And then the metamorphic rock is derived from pre-existing rock by mineralogical, chemical, or structural changes, especially in the solid state, in response to marked changes in temperature, pressure, and chemical environment at depth, not in the surface, at depth in the Earth's, whoa, that should be crust. There's a typo. That is below the zones of weathering and cementation. I just wanted to cover real quick the 3 main types of rock. I think you probably all know this already. But here we got a volcano. There's the magma, which is in a liquid form. Shoots out of the volcano, pours out. This is how the Hawaiian Islands are made. If you're not aware of it, you're aware of it now. And this material then spreads out, forms the island, and then cools. And so this is one of the metamorphic rocks, and some of the production is such. Now take a look at this lava flow. You can see that this is lava flow. But notice what is happening at the surface of the lava flow. It's freezing. And the rock is forming just on the top, underneath the frozen rock, right here. You don't want to step on it because it's thin, and your foot's going to go through, and that'll be the end of your foot, maybe the end of your life too. But you see the point. It is freezing on the surface, still liquid underneath. This is critical in the formation of paramagnetic rock, we have since found. Slow cooling leads to paramagnetic rock. Some say, what about concrete? This sounds very familiar to concrete. Doesn't concrete do this? It kind of comes out as a liquid, semi-liquid, and then it becomes a solid. Doesn't that always work out? Well, it's formed from the dust and aggregates of stone. Paramagnetic stone is actually helpful, and it becomes stiff in a few hours to a few days. What about concrete, Dr. Dykstra? Concrete is also paramagnetic. So the plot starts to thicken, at least in my scientific mind, thinking, this is so cool. We have found that slow-drying concrete is more paramagnetic than fast-drying concrete. Obviously, when we're building, oftentimes we do go for the fast-drying stuff because we're in a hurry to put things up. And we want something pretty stiff within 24 hours if we can get it. But as you know, good solid concrete takes a minimum of a week and sometimes 28 days in order to become absolutely solid if you're throwing something big on it like a skyscraper. So there are 4 types. You're not asked to memorize this. There are 4 types of basaltic rock dust with different chemical composition and paramagnetic intensity. So listen to what I just said. Basaltic rock. I just told you that these are the rocks that are almost always paramagnetic. So I want you to focus not on all of the numbers. I just want you to focus on a couple things. The couple things that I want you to focus on is this, because we get this all the time. Iron oxide. Well, the reason why it's paramagnetic, Tom, is because there's iron in it. That's why it's paramagnetic. It's like the whole ferromagnetic thing. You get it? Ferromagnetic, paramagnetic. I'm like, I got it. I got it. So you're telling me that the amount of iron is a reflection upon its paramagnetic intensity. Like, exactly. And I would say, that's not what the data says. 4 types of basaltic rock. We have 13, 12, 7, and 11. Relatively close amounts of iron. Do you see equal amounts of paramagnetic intensity? 1960 to 3280 sometimes can be great variability. This one, rock bottom, 270 to 330. And yet, it's got 12. It's pretty close to 13. This one's really low on iron. Therefore, it's going to have a much lower paramagnetic quality. It doesn't. It's between 4,800 to 6,000 CGS. And then the other one over here between 940 and 1350, coming in at 11. Can you relate iron with paramagnetism? No, you cannot. We have to measure it. That gives us a much better idea about what we're dealing with, because we do want the higher paramagnetic levels because we have found this is what the plant's like. Question?
So you can't relate the iron oxide, but you mentioned basalt.
Yep.
Which is typically around 48 to 52% silica.
Yep.
What is the character trait or the whole rock analysis on basalt that makes it more paramagnetic than say a granite?
Granite is also paramagnetic, mostly so. What is the difference? It's the arrangement of the molecules. It was an earlier slide that I discussed. That is what makes it paramagnetic. It's the arrangement of the molecules. If they are arranged in a particular way, they will have higher paramagnetic values. If you do not have that arrangement, they will have no paramagnetic or diamagnetic qualities at all. But if they have the ability to arrange themselves, that is the game changer. So just being a basalt does not in and of itself make it. But usually most basalts are paramagnetic, but the degree you can't determine until you test it. Okay? You're welcome. So minerals from rock. How do you do that? I talked about it ever so briefly yesterday. How does a tree get minerals from rock? Well, acid. It releases acid through the, there are lots of acids, humic acids, we've talked about that, fulvic acid. There are lots of acids that will digest rock. And it doesn't need to digest that much. It's not like a tree grows on a rock and the tree consumes the rock within a week or two. It's not the way it works. It's a very, very slow process. Organic acids can also be released by the microbes. And these microbes can be found in animal manures, green manures, variable composts. These microbes need organic matter. They need water too, and a suitable energy source, mostly from the sun. And a lot of this stuff is getting a lot of energy from the sun. These biological processes, as I said, work relatively slowly and work well for the plant. I did mention yesterday that the trees growing on rocks are very slow growing, very tough, very high bricks, but still slow growing. Mineralized compost. What about putting some of this paramagnetic rock dust in compost? If it's used as an amendment, the mineral elements are made more bioavailable because these trace elements are biocatalysts in microbial-driven enzyme reactions, which is the process of composting, acting as coenzymes such as the cobalt, the manganese, the copper. They break down the compost and incorporate the trace minerals in the compost. You've now got healthier compost. Many individuals who have used paramagnetic rocks or rock dust for their compost have increased the quality of the compost considerably due to this addendum. And you don't need that much. You don't need to dump the entire farm into it. It doesn't need that much in order to health up the compost. And therefore, it makes everything more available to a growing plant when it is eventually incorporated into the soil. In fact, it is the fineness of the grain and the mixture of the trace elements that are said to enhance the microbial activity. So we know this because small particles are used by the microbes. They have a difficulty eating a big rock, but the small particles they're pretty good at. So the finely ground rock powders do have a large surface area, and that works out well. The trace elements function as chemical catalysts, as I mentioned, and the microbes use these to manufacture and release soil enzymes, making plant health go up. It means the Brix levels go up. However, and this is the however, the more you pulverize paramagnetic rock, the less paramagnetic it becomes. This should be common sense. If you understood what I was talking about in the earlier slides, I said that it has to do with the arrangement of the molecules. If you pulverize it over and over again and turn it into dust, you no longer have that arrangement. And the paramagnetic quality begins to be lost when you do that. That's the unfortunate side effect of pulverizing it. So oftentimes many of the farmers will not put down a fine dust. They will simply put it down in more or less a granular form and kind of work it in order for its healthful benefits. Some of the documented benefits, and I've got 2 pages of this. So these are some of the things that have been talked about that I have collected from a lot of different places. The granite dust, we were just talking about that. It promotes very fast and healthy growth of tree seedlings in the nursery. Nursery managers are using it and getting better health in the nursery. The granite dust particularly benefits nitrogen-fixing trees. I can tell you that's because of cobalt and some of the others that the nitrogen-fixing bacteria need in order to do their job. Granite dust can provide some potassium to plants on demand, not an excess of potassium, which is what we have now in agriculture, but on demand. Oh, you need some potassium? Here's a little bit of potassium. And it can disperse it just as the plant needs it. Granite dust does have a high pH, but it doesn't seem to raise significantly the pH of acid soils. That was an interesting one. Diorite dust, a type of paramagnetic dust, may reduce weed competition. So you could, I've talked to you before, and other speakers too. Health up the soil, weeds disappear. Quarry dust. A lot of quarry dust is coming as paramagnetic sources. We have a lot of them up here in Canada. They improve water infiltration. They include water retention and free draining soils. Massive improvements there. The quarry dust also benefits dairy pastures by promoting legume growth. Legumes are the nitrogen fixers, and I just mentioned the reason why this rock dust is so important for that. And it can do so at the expense of less productive species. Weeds. Granite dust has been given a marginally higher yield from a lupin crop than either chemical fertilizer or a commercial rock dust blend, which may or may not have the paramagnetic quality. Composting earthworms. If you are composting, you throw a little bit of the paramagnetic rock in there, and the earthworms love it. The quarry dust may also affect the way plants respond to electromagnetic radiation, in particular, excess solar radiation. I'll be talking about in the second part of the talk. And then we got a few more. Granite dust does not seem to benefit well-nurtured gardens. Do you remember when I was asked the question yesterday about the seed inoculations? And I said the seed inoculations really won't help you if you have healthy seed. We have also found no matter how good the paramagnetic rock is that we're putting down, it's really not going to help a crop that has reached the apex of 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 bricks. There's really not much more you can do because it has reached the higher state. However, if you're dealing with low bricks plants, you can get massive benefits from this because there's a shortage of energy, among other things. Granite and marble dust do appear to benefit garden crops. This has been a lot of information that just comes in from garden farmers. The granite dust contains, this is weird, 27 parts per million lanthanum. Huh? A rare earth considered by the Chinese to be a plant growth promoter. They don't test for lanthanum on most tests. So there are these benefits which I and others are still not even aware as to why the benefits are occurring. But we also do know that there are some minerals in there, some obscure minerals, which other countries, like the Chinese, have said that this actually promotes growth. Quarry dust may deter wingless grasshoppers. Well, that's my area right there. So you health up the plant with quarry dust, especially if it's got a good paramagnetic quality, the grasshoppers leave. Tree seedlings raised in a granite dust enriching the potting mix. Don't need that much. This is not pure paramagnetic rock dust that they're being raised in. There's just a little bit put in there. Appear to continue fast, healthy growth after planting under adverse climatic and soil conditions, meaning they're tougher, meaning they're higher bricks. Read into this. I don't have to measure this, but I know this is going on. And there could be a link between the use of rock dust and the noted absence of fungal attack in the early stages of seedling growth. This also has to do with healthing up the soil. So if you put this in, reduces fungal growth. You put it in, insects don't attack it. You put it in, your trees go faster. You can see there are a lot of questions that are coming up as we're going through and realizing some of these results that have been noted so many different times in so many different places all around the world. Here is a weird study. This was done by Boral Construction. I actually got a chance to visit Tony when I was down in Australia, and we met and talked, but Boral, one of the biggest mining companies in Australia, was actually doing some work on the paramagnetic rock and coming across some very impressive results. They're not doing it anymore, but Tony, God bless his soul, he downloaded a lot of the stuff that Boral had done, which I now have in my laboratory. And they said one of the major findings of one particular work, it's the obscure stuff, which is cool, is that sewage sludge treated with new soil, it's a paramagnetic type of product that they were putting out, has a pronounced reductive effect on the production of odorant chemicals. They reduced the smell, the noxious smell coming from sludge, by simply spreading this stuff out, reduced by 80 to 90%. And they've even got some numbers here to talk about the reduction in the sludge, and then the sludge plus dust and the number of odorants that were being detected. So again, this just adds to the weirdness of a phenomenon that even as I stand before you right now is still not completely understood. Boral did work with a very highly paramagnetic basalt. It was an igneous rock. It was formed with molten magma. The magmatic difference, let's see, it's not uncommon to get layering. This is a good thing to talk about. Layering is important. I just mentioned to you earlier in the presentation, okay, that it cools on the top quickly. And then underneath that, it cools a little bit underneath it. And then it cools a little bit underneath that, and so on and so forth. So you have molten magma come out. I don't know how thick it is. It could be a meter or two or more. like the metric system? Yeah. I am a scientist. We use the metric system in the United States. And you will find that when this is put out, that the paramagnetic quality of the rock gets better the deeper you go. A number of individuals I've talked to, I'm like the go-to man in paramagnetism because I'm almost like one of the few go-to men in the world. But I were talking with them and they said, yeah, had some great results on the paramagnetic rock and we were selling it and we kept digging and digging and the rate went up. I mean, our CGS levels went up. And I said, yes, this happens all of the time. It's almost like you don't want the stuff on the surface. You want to wait. It's like, oh, I'll just wait till you get rid of, several hundred tons. Then I'll get the stuff underneath. And it's always going to be slightly better. And that's just a phenomena that when we talk about the layering, is that the deeper you go, the better it gets. They were working with rock anywhere between 0 for controls all the way up to 6230, which is a pretty high paramagnetic quality. They had no major mineralogical chemical composition that was that different. The basalts did have the highest paramagnetic levels and improved plant growth the most. They did work with the time that they had to ascertain how this may reduce odor emissions. They did not come to any concrete conclusions, but they probably think it was increasing the aerobic bacteria, which they're probably right, because anaerobic bacteria smell. If you've ever been in anaerobic soil before, you know that it stinks. Smaller particles, less than 75 microns, are good for cation exchange capacity. Means the plants can use them for their mineralization and make it available to the plant. But the larger particles, with the higher paramagnetic value, because they haven't been pulverized yet, still have their crystalline structure and have the benefits of it. This is now leading to a question, which you should be thinking ahead. Is it the minerals, or is it the paramagnetism that's adding to the health of the plant? The paramagnetic rocks should be worked into the soil. They usually don't leave them on the top, especially for golf courses or highly critical applications. And the finer dust can be spread on top. If you wanted to do that, that'll be just fine. What else did they report? Increased soil moisture retention, which is the same thing others were reporting. The addition of essential trace elements, others were reporting that. Improved drainage, others were reporting the same thing. They had a slow increase of pH in acidic soils, others were also reporting that. They had suppression of weeds, also reported by others. An improvement of microbial activity within the soil, not as reported as the others, but you can see they were starting to put numbers on the effects that were noted and have been noted over the years in regards to this paramagnetic soil. And the performance, of course, varies based on the amount and the quality of the material that you use. Just like crystals, they are wonderful resonators for watches, and it has been suggested that the crystals of paramagnetic rock may also resonate within certain frequencies, good or bad, because a frequency can be both good or bad. Just because it's resonating to a frequency doesn't make it good necessarily, because there are good frequencies and bad frequencies out there. But it's a natural substance. And we would assume that they're resonating to natural frequencies, as I'll point out briefly. And so this brings up the question that I just talked about a couple minutes ago, because when these results were coming in, it was causing a buzz in the industry. The buzz in the industry is there's this incredibly cheap substance which is increasing plant growth, making everything healthier, yada, yada, yada. They're not using our products anymore. What is going on here? And so they came to the conclusion, it was the hopeful conclusion, but it was their conclusion, that it had everything to do with the minerals and nothing to do with the paramagnetic quality at all. So yeah, there's a magnetic field around it, it's induced by a magnetic field, whatever, whatever, whatever. You guys, that has nothing to do with plant growth. It has to do with the mineralization. Oh, does it? Because when we put out granular paramagnetic material, at the end of the season, it's still granular. So it's not breaking down that much. So when you talk about plant availability, I would say, okay, there may be some, but exactly how much is going on there? And so this became kind of important and then in order to test, to separate the mineralization, which is absolutely without question part of the benefit on plants, without a doubt. I don't doubt that for 1 second. Separating the mineralization of the soil and the availability of the plants, and compare that to the pure magnetic field produced by the paramagnetic rock. Separate them. How would you do something like that? Well, you remember when a few decades ago we used to take pictures with a 35mm camera? Yeah, I know, I'm taking you way back right now. But they usually had the 35mm film in canisters. And these canisters, plastic canisters, can be obtained by the thousands from companies that were developing the film at the time. And I collected thousands of them. And so we had the opportunity now to fill these film canisters with paramagnetic rock, thus keeping them separated from the plant itself. So the effect, the magnetic effect, goes straight through the plastic film canister. No problem at all. It's not being abated in the least. But there's absolutely no mineralization going on because it's in a film canister and it's not available to the plant. So now I have been able to separate them, and we can start taking a look at a few quick studies to see whether or not it's all about the mineralization, as has been reported by large companies who are bigger than me and much smarter than me, and then take a look to see what the magnetic component is. So here's the first one. We have a control, just looking at plant height. In this particular one, we got a control. We get some averages at just under 5 inches. Paramagnetic soil addendum, pushing it up to 5.5 inches, a little bit of a jump, not much. And we also had ferromagnetic, which is a magnet, and this was in Zinnia elegans, and that actually causes suppression of the plant growth. We also found that the stems were thicker. We weren't able to measure them with a caliper at the time. The leaves were broader, usually a sign of health, and that they had a more extensive root growth, okay? So with the paramagnetic soil addendum. Here in this study, this one's by a different individual, this was done by Ross. He took a look at the root length in radishes and took these film canisters and filled them up with just enough paramagnetic soil in order to get a reading of 200 or 400 or 600 or all the way to 2,000, and look to see, is this going to make a hill of a beans difference on the radishes? And it did. Again, no mineralization, but as the CGS level increased, the radishes, in a very clean, scientific fashion, you can do a nice regression line with that, are increasing. I also note we didn't max out. We never maxed out. I don't know. We didn't go to 4,000 or 6,000 or beyond. But at 2,000, everything kept growing and improving. This was taking a look at plant mass of those same radishes, and you could see the mass, similar to the weight, was much higher at 2,000 and also increased. It never leveled off, meaning we hadn't maxed out on the CGS level. We could have gone higher than 2,000. Same thing again, same radish, same study. This was looking at the level of root arborization. This was a subjective measurement. There was no way to measure root arborization cleanly, and so it was eyeballed. But eyeballing it, we also saw the same effect, is that yes, root arborization was increased drastically as we kept going higher and higher on the CGS reading. This was a different study. What Roger decided to do on this one is he wanted to use mung beans and test the paramagnetic rock. He simply covered it in a wax paper so that it had no contact with the mung beans, and then propagated them on a wet paper towel. And they will grow on a wet paper towel if you're not familiar with mung beans. And he then tested to see, all right, what's going to happen if we just keep it in the close vicinity of the mung beans? No soil, zero soil. They're sitting on wet paper towels. The percent increase over the controls. This isn't how far they grew. This is that they were almost 20% longer in stem length. They were almost 15% longer in leaf length. The total biomass was just over 15% more biomass. And the roots, again, there was no soil, not as much of a difference. If they were in soil, we might have expected a little bit more. But even among the roots were still growing. They were still growing above and beyond what the controls were doing. And this was in Vigna radiata. So there's a lot of interesting things out there that make you scratch your head and go, what is going on here? So the amendment to compost piles, well known, everybody should be doing that. Amendment to potting mixes, same thing for greenhouse crops and transplants. So if you have a low bricks plant in a greenhouse, and you do, go ahead and add paramagnetic rock or dust, and you will be able to increase the bricks. It may not be as high as it should be, but you will be able to improve the situation somewhat. You can use it as a top dressing for greenhouse potted plants. You can add it to fresh livestock bedding. The livestock prefer to nestle in bedding of paramagnetic rock or dust. It also absorbs the volatiles, so it makes it smell less, which is kind of a neat plus. An amendment to soils, amendment to compost teas, very beneficial there. Amendment to blended foliar fertilizers, and as a human dietary mineral supplement. Not that people are eating this by the spoonful, but they are putting very small amounts in their coffee or tea or food in order to get some of the benefits from this. That's all that's being said here. Very, very small amounts. And they put it in animal feed, and the animals preferentially will go after a very light dusting of paramagnetic rock dust on in the feed. Compost alone can lift the soil from 30 to 70. It's the oxygen, the heat, and the life that all have a factor in increasing the paramagnetic levels. You all understand why oxygen increases the paramagnetic levels. So all things being equal, you open up the soil and bring in oxygen, the paramagnetic level of the soil is going to go up. It's not going to be huge. Still going to be less than 100 CGS, but it is noted and it's measurable. Weeds can increase the paramagnetic levels in the soil too. Huh? Why can they do that? Because the job of the weeds is to improve the soil. If you don't know what cover crops you should put on your fallow field, you can do what I do in Florida, which is absolutely nothing. And within 2 weeks, you will have so much weed growth that you will, if you get down low on the ground, all you will see is green. There's absolutely no brown dirt left. So we just allow the weeds to do what they have to do. The ones that will grow are the ones that we want to clean the soil. And then I just go ahead and work those back into the soil. And within 3 short seasons, I can go from light brown sandy soil to dark brown semi-sandy soil in just 3 seasons. And it is drastic. 3 seasons. You don't have to wait 20, 30, 40 seasons to do it. But if you keep working in that organic matter and use the paramagnetic dust, you will get blacker soil very, very quickly. For those of you who have black soil, you're probably thinking, I don't need black soil. I already got it. Well, come to Florida, and I'll show you what tan soil looks like. All right, first of all, they bring minerals up from the deep in the soil. The weed then dies and leaves the paramagnetic material closer to the surface, all a good thing. And then weeds grow under conditions that many plants cannot. So they have a benefit of adding some paramagnetic qualities to the soil. They also aerate the soil, which adds a paramagnetic quality, and so on and so forth. Dr. Callahan, my mentor, ran an experiment with ryegrass, where it was grown in very weak soil of 60 CGS. That's not that strong. But in that, he had ryegrass that was starting at about 10 to 15 nitrogen nodules. After this treatment with nominal 60 CGS, the nodules increased to 200. Did the plant respond? Yes. Are we measuring it just in nitrogen nodules? Well, yes, in this particular instance. But you see the massive effects that are occurring with even just 60 CGS. Mining companies need to be sought out, approached, and their material tested, and then a system to transport rock dust may be implemented. Why do I have this slide? I'll start in the antennas in just a second. I'm going to check the time real quick, Cindy, to see my time. Okay, got it. I think I'm actually on time. So I started about that. So we're about an hour into it. Okay. So the mining companies need to be sought out. Where is the source of this paramagnetic material? It's mostly being pulled out of the earth for free. Most of the mining companies, if you approach them, and you've got a lot more in Canada than we do in the United States, you can be approached and you'll say how much, and if you test it too, if you go there and test it and it's good, they'll say how much will you, can I get a couple tons for? And I know what they're going to say. They almost always do. You can have it for free. I'm not going to charge you anything. All you have to do is get charged for freight. So either they're going to drive it or you can go pick it up. So you got to pay gas. This obviously helps in order to be closer to the mine. So if you find a good source of paramagnetic rock, which is mostly being excavated by the mining companies, and you want to spread it over your land, this is how it needs to be done. Because you're not going to be able to do this yourself. They will remove it for free. You just pay transportation costs. Granted, it's heavy stuff. So transportation is not going to be like $1 or anything like that. You could easily be spending several $100s on a load in order to get it to your farm, easily. Hopefully not too much more than that, but in this time, who knows what's going to happen. So this is how to obtain paramagnetic rock. I can tell you, and this is the reason why I mostly give this presentation in Canadian audiences than I do in the United States, because you have greater access, far greater access to mining companies in Canada than we do in the United States, and therefore you have a much better opportunity to find a local mining company which will sell it to you if you wish to go in this direction. Now, where does some of this energy come from? The paramagnetism is thought to be collecting and focusing energy from the atmosphere. These are some of the theories. These are some of the theories that I hold and that others have come up with. What type of energy from the atmosphere? Well, electricity, lightning, among other things. But there are lots of other energy sources out there that the paramagnetic rock, in all practical purposes, seem to be able to focus, especially if it's spread out over a large field, because we believe that antennas that are lying down, not an antenna that's sticking out, but an antenna that's lying down, if you spread it with paramagnetic rock dust, then becomes an antenna. It just happens to be a laterally based, or instead of a vertical based, a horizontal antenna. And the beneficial effects are profound, and they extend far beyond where that goes. So even the adjoining rows are being affected by the paramagnetic rock that is put down. So it doesn't even need to be done in every single row, although it can be. So what is happening with the lightning? Well, we have lightning striking the earth, hits the ground, bounces right back up, hits the troposphere, bounces right back down, hits the ground, so on and so forth. And this happens all around the earth until eventually the wavelength dies out. This is happening at the rate of 2,000 times per minute on planet Earth. Most of the lightning strikes that hit Earth are over water, so it's over the ocean. It's not really affecting us. But there are certain regions of the world that are kind of like the lightning capitals. We have Tampa in Florida is really the lightning capital in our, probably even our country, certainly in the state of Florida. There are other parts in Africa that are known for being very high in lightning activity. But generally speaking, it's a composite result of all this lightning activity creating resonant waves right next to the Earth's atmosphere. Okay? So these natural fields, these are not unnatural fields. I'm not talking about 5G towers. I'm talking about natural fields in the Earth. And they extend all the way around the Earth. It doesn't matter if they're being made here or here, because they will bounce around, and 2,000 times a minute, this is in a constant state. This constant state means the entire Earth is covered in these fields. and it is predictable. It is measurable. We know that these fields resonate around planet Earth, and we know that they are between 7.81 and 7.83 hertz. That's how specifically we know. These are measurable waves. They don't vary that much. Some people just say 7.8 hertz. That's fine. Other times I'm talking to people, they mention the 8 hertz frequency waves. That's fine too. Sometimes they like to round it up. But it is thought to be these waves that are being pulled in by the paramagnetic rock, especially when they are set up as antennas, either being lying down or in a round tower, as I just talked about, and I hope we get a chance to show you. So these Schumann waves are being collected. These natural frequencies are beneficial to all life on Earth, meaning there's absolutely no way I'm ever going to go to a moon base. And there's absolutely no way I'm going to take Elon Musk up on going to Mars, because I know the natural frequencies are not found up there. And we also know that everyone going up to the space station has a 1-year limit, and then they have to come back down in order to be acclimated once again to the resonant frequencies that are found on planet Earth, because they don't get them up on the space station. So these natural frequencies are there, they're real, they're measurable, and they are healthy. And we also have various resonances. So we have also a 14 hertz wave, a 20 hertz wave, a 26 hertz wave, and a 32 hertz wave, all considered to be Schumann resonance based upon the initial 7.8 Schumann wave. Who discovered it? Dr. Schumann, obviously. That's why it's named the way that it is. So this is what's going on. So when you have these waves and they're back and forth, you can have plants and even microbes in the soil that are being bathed in these natural frequencies. Well, that sounds really useful, because storing the center's energy is important for a plant. It needs to absorb it with the chlorophyll, and it translocates more than 90% of the photons, light energy, into an energy-carrying electron. And strong sunlight, when it gets too strong, they can actually reduce their absorbance so that they don't get burned. If they don't have this capability, low Brix plants, they get burned by the sun. If you have burned plants, that's partly one of the reasons why this is occurring. And so they could do this, they kind of reflect it, or at least not absorb it, in order to avoid overheating. It can be stored in lightning too. Schonlen, this is known back in 1950. This is 70 years old. He measured point discharge from plants. So if a thunderhead, lightning, is particularly heavily charged, he noted that even leaves and blades of grass may glow at the tips because of intense ionization activity. So this energy is being absorbed. It's on the outside of plants. It's on the inside of plants. We have paramagnetic rock, which is able to collect it, adding to the health of the plants. And all of this comes together in a cohesive theory, which is still being worked out. And he found that during thunderstorms, the flow of electricity to Earth was considerably greater than the flow from Earth during fair weather. So there's a lot of absorption of energy. But there are some problems with absorbing energy. We have table salt, which is what color? White. Calcium salts, well, that's white too. Magnesium salts, whitish. Sometimes they have a silvery whitish appearance to them. And we have potassium salts, which are also whitish, kind of a grayish white. So what happens if you have too much salt on your land and it's sitting there on the top, maybe because you were just invaded and they've spread salt on your fields? What are you going to do? Well, we got a problem right now, because the salt, if it's located on the surface, is now creating a beautiful reflective array that the Schumann waves will not be able to penetrate. So not only have I talked to you about the problems with salt on your fields, biochemical problems, now I'm bringing in an energy component to it too. You are now reducing the energy getting into your soil, and that is serious. So if you have that, Best thing to do is break it up. Oh, well, some of you don't till. Okay. Well, in that case, how about taking an antenna and sticking it into the ground so that you can absorb energy from the atmosphere and pass it through down to the earth. Does that sound like a good idea? I think that sounds like a pretty good idea. That makes good physical sense. I like the way that sounds. I can make a better antenna than this, though. I can actually decrease the impedance with the atmosphere by extending out certain extensions, which will allow electromagnetic waves to be more efficiently collected, which is cool. It's just an electromagnetic trick. And then once the energy is collected, I can actually spread that energy out rather than just focusing it right there. I can spread that energy out by taking extensions and sending those out through the soil so that I can collect this information, this energy from the atmosphere, pass it through an antenna, bypass the soil crust layer or the high compaction, which some of you have, and allow it to go into the soil. So what about this antenna? What does this antenna look like? Looks like a tree. All trees are antennas. Every single tree is an antenna. They're differential antennas. Some of them are good at certain frequencies more than others. They're not all the same, but all trees are antennas. So when you are clearing your land, because you just want a clean stretch of land so that your John Deere can go straight back and forth without any trees getting in the way, you're actually creating a problem for yourself. Some trees should be left up because they have the importance of collecting information, the Schumann waves, and paramagnetic rock is a component of that as well. So antennas and paramagnetic rock are working together in order to increase the health, simply from an energetic standpoint, of course. I haven't mentioned really too much biochemistry in this presentation at all. And there are games that can be played. We can have a linear array antenna system. So you put all the antennas in a linear array, and you can now have absorption not only of the individual element, but you can have them operating as an entire array, which includes both broadside and end-fire arrays. For those of you who were involved in ham radio, you're familiar with that terminology. So there are many different ways to collect the information more efficiently than just having a single element, a single tree. And of course, we have a forest situation. How many times have people walked into a forest and they feel great and they don't know why? They usually attribute it to fresh air. That's certainly a component of it. A lot of fresh air in forests. But why do so many people feel so good in forests? You've got a massive amount of natural frequencies that are being focused within that forest. No matter how big it is. It might be a small forest, one that I have in the backyard, or a larger forest going across several states of the United States, and of course into Canada as well, across many provinces. So all of these trees are doing their job, and this is imparting a certain degree of health to the entire earth, not just us. I pass this every day on my way to work. This is a hay field. They collect it for hay, but he hasn't cleaned it out. You'd think many people would, well, I need to clean off the trees because I'm just going at it and I'm collecting hay and selling the hay, but this guy, he leaves up the trees. And therefore, the hay is going to be healthier, higher bricks than it is in other areas where the trees have been cleared. It's a beautiful piece of land. I've had my eye on it all the time, but I pass it every day on the way to work and then usually on my way home, and I just salivate over it. Not like I could afford it or anything, but I enjoy looking at it. So this energy, how do you focus the energy? Well, you can focus it. Whoops, yes?
Is there a specific amount of trees on your field that is ideal for that, or just have a few?
Yeah, the Schumann waves that they're getting are so big and so large that you do not need a high concentration of them. So a single windrow will give you multiple hectares that will be covered. So it's not that many. You don't need that much. As far as a specific number, no, I don't. But in a hectare, I would certainly think err on the low side of having 2 or 3 trees per hectare. That's on the low side. You can have more, but that would be on the low. You don't need that many. You don't need that many at all. Energy can be transported through fiber optics. Fiber optics is working for our phones and other things. We have lots of fiber optic technology. Water is also a fiber optic. Energy can be transferred. The red light up here bounces down the water and makes the water look red. Change the LED light, it looks like blue water. It's just LED light that's bouncing in between. This is a common occurrence. It's essentially like a fiber optic technology. The same thing occurs with microfilaments in the cell. All of the cells have the ability to transfer energy. So the microbes that I alluded to and I've talked a little bit about today are also collecting this energy. There's a researcher I know who does a lot of work on microtubules, a lot of interesting stuff about how energy is transferred around the cell instantaneously. And this has been shown in a laboratory where we've got classical light propagating in a multi-mode interference device where light simply comes through here and it separates very efficiently. Notice there's no light in between. It is perfectly contained within this waveguide. They call them waveguides. And so this shows you the efficiency of a waveguide, which extrapolates to the efficiency of a tree, extrapolates to the efficiency of a microfilament in a cell, and you can see how all life on Earth is able to focus and collect and transfer this energy. And here's one of the round towers I talked about it. They're big. These are not small. Because if you're trying to collect Schumann waves, let me be frank with you, the bigger the better. A small antenna doesn't pick up Schumann waves as well as a large one. And so these round towers were put up. They're a little bit of a mystery. I know Phil Callahan talked about them in some of his books. They've got a lot of weird things about them. Sometimes paramagnetic soil is found all the way to the top. Sometimes it's found in layers with diamagnetism, paramagnetism, diamagnetism. Not understood completely why. They've also got doors or entrances well above the bottom. Also lots of weird aspects of these round towers that are not understood. He also found out that these round towers, if you took a look at them from a bird's eye view, simulated the night sky. They're at exactly the locations of the stars, especially when they were made. So there's just a lot of weirdness out there that is not understood, but we see that some of the ancients, they knew a lot of things that we did not, and they even had the ability in order to do a star map in Ireland, while obviously not being able to fly or go up in a drone. So impressive stuff. There's another round tower right there. This was in Ireland, the other one was in Belgium, but you get the points. And obviously, speaking about the points, this increases the impedance with the atmosphere, makes it a better antenna. If you don't have a point at the top, it doesn't have good impedance. But if you do have a point at the top, it makes a better antenna. We'll catch the wavelength, pull it into the antenna, and therefore distribute it as is necessary. So this is an antenna, and it's a very efficient one. So what's the deal with this? What about all these frequencies? What's the deal with the Schumann waves? What's the deal with the paramagnetic rock focusing it? What is the deal with all of this? What is the importance to me, a farmer? Well, I just explained a whole bunch of it already, but it gets better. So if you want to get your brain waves tested, I know my wife would like me to get my brain waves tested. She's afraid what she'll find. I'm afraid what she'll find. But we have beta waves, alpha waves, theta waves, and delta waves. Less than 4 hertz, 4 to 8 hertz, 8 to 12 hertz, or 12 hertz and up. They are all given very specific names, and they hook you all up with electrodes on your head, and they will start asking you questions and to help to understand how your brain is operating. One of the things that they will normally do in order to set the standard is after they have everything hooked up, they will then say, close your eyes. As soon as a person closes their eyes, the 8 hertz alpha waves stop almost instantaneously. And therefore, you are able to see the other waves better. And they will say, open your eyes. And the 8 hertz waves appears again. and then they say close them. And they're trying to get a baseline right now as to how high the other waves are so that it's not dominated by the 8 hertz wave, which is mediated through our eyes. Listen to what I just said. The dominant wave in your head is 8 hertz. Please tell me you're understanding the association with the Schumann waves now. So we've now got Schumann waves at 8 hertz. That's the big one. 7.8, 14, 20, 26, and 32, corresponding very closely to the brainwave activity of every human being on planet Earth. My waves and your waves, your father's waves, your children's waves, everybody's waves. We are literally tuned to the Earth through the natural frequencies. I'm not talking about the weird stuff. People talk about the cell phone frequencies. They've got the 5G and all that stuff. I'm talking about natural frequencies. We're bathed in it. It is healthy to us. We don't detect it, but it's there. The plants are also bathed in it. And if there are ways of preventing that energy from getting in, we have ways of getting it back in. We can create antennas. We have trees. We have paramagnetic rock dust, which is focusing the energy, adjusts the lines a little bit, and brings them in, and increases the energy capacity of the area. Again, these are all energy components that I'm talking about right now. And even a few groups have observed, there's a lot of wording here, nonlinear nanoscale oscillations at frequencies between 0.2 to 30 hertz of human erythrocyte membrane, and were also observed in monocytes, lymphocytes, 3T6 fibroblasts, cardiomyocytes, and murine lymphoma B and T cell lines. What did I just say? All I said is that they have solid evidence that even individual cells have the capability of picking up these 0 to 30 hertz waves and measure them. And this was done back in 1990. So we have the ability to pick them up. Plants have the ability to pick them up. Single cell organisms, the microbes that are in your soil that some of you are working really hard to kill, are also picking this up too. And hopefully you're understanding how all of this starts to work together. So that was the conclusion of my talk. My goal was to introduce paramagnetism to you. I wanted you to understand the basic concepts of it and even how to obtain it if you want to go in that direction. I also then had to talk very briefly about antennas, as Cindy has requested, because Cindy always requests things of me, and I always try to satisfy them to the best of my abilities. All right. You're welcome, Cindy. There was a shameless plug. I would like to thank Cindy on a serious note. Thank you for inviting me up again. I'm so looking forward to the hockey game tonight. And we'll see how that goes. Someone's got a what?
You need an Oilers hoodie.
An Oilers hoodie? If I am caught on national camera with an Oilers hoodie at that, and I could tell one of Karen's siblings could be watching the game. He could be watching the game. And if I am seen, it will be one of those, oh, that's Tom. Oh, and he gets on the phone and he calls everyone in Chicago, and it's like, he married my sister, and look at him, this is awful, that's it. He is dead. And so we're sending a hitman to him right now, and we're going to take care of it. So. Yes, it would. Do you have sunglasses and a fake mustache? Okay, we'll do some shopping. I mean, you're picking me up at 5:30. That's an hour and a half before the game. We got plenty of time to get a mustache. All right. So I'm okay. Whoever wins, obviously I want to support my Canadians. If the Edmonton Oilers win, great. I'm happy to enjoy that with you. If Chicago wins tonight, secretly I'll be like, okay, well that's cool too. You know, that keeps peace in the family. So I'm okay. I want you to know. I know you guys are not okay with the outcome, but I'm okay with whoever wins tonight. So, all right, thank you very much for putting up with me again. Thank you. Oh, you're dropping things, Lauren.
I'm falling apart.
I'm done, right? No questions?
Thanks so much, Tom. Any questions? We're going to take just a couple seconds to see if we can wrap up.
You didn't talk about diamagnetism?
Yes.
I don't think. So, sorry.
Yeah, I didn't talk about it on purpose because it has very little relevance to agriculture. It has great scientific interest because it's essentially the opposite. But paramagnetism is if you have that hanging rock I told you about, it'll be slightly attracted to a magnet. A diamagnetic substance will be slightly repelled by a magnet. So it's an opposite force. And it's not a very strong one. Like I said, you'll see it move towards the magnet, paramagnetism. And if you move the magnet in, you'll see it move slightly away. But it's a very small movement. That's why I don't talk about it. There's diamagnetic materials. We are basically diamagnetic. This has been talked about, if you want, as far as human health is concerned, why some people are actually taking the paramagnetic rock dust in very small amounts. It's because we're diamagnetic. They get some paramagnetic in them, and therefore they find themselves more complete. And so I don't know the validity of that. I'm not taking it myself, but I think you understand. If you take the opposites, there can be some health benefits. So that's the reason why I didn't mention it. And it had to do with time, too, because I knew I was running out of time. I'm just going to check real quick. I know there's only one question, but how did I do? I broke an hour and a half. I told you I was going to keep it under an hour and a half. You doubted me whether I could keep it in an hour and a half. I kept it under an hour and a half. You told me that they wanted lunch, and I was to keep it short.
Any other questions at this point?
If you put out granular, how long does that last?
It depends on how much rain you get. In Florida, you'll probably get 5 to 10 years. But in a dry environment, 20 to 30.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's like
Yeah, it's pretty much one application. One application, you're done.